Hi, this is Debbie. Welcome back to Missouri Cricket Barn Homestead. I was just giving you a few shots of what all is going on here in the garden. We've had lots of harvests already so far. We've had cucumbers and squash and peppers and all kinds of things, and our tomatoes are producing like crazy right now. Of course, we don't have any tomatoes ready yet. I've only had one out of the garden so far that was ready to eat, and it was absolutely delicious. But we have so many tomatoes that are setting on the vines that they are beginning to pull the vines over. And even though they're tied with jute twine, I use all natural products if I can, except for some coated wire, which I do have as their stakes. And we use bamboo as well whenever we can get it. We just try to use as much natural or looks natural products as we can in the garden. Of course, we don't use any pesticides, no fertilizers, anything like that. And all of it is looking so beautiful right now. The only thing is still kind of suffering is a few of the peppers that were in the beginning having some trouble, but they are beginning to start to put on new growth. They're doing well, as I've shown in the last video. But we are now getting spaghetti squash that is running. Remember, I planted spaghetti squash at the beginning of each row of my garden because I ran out of room, and they're beginning to reach now for basically the fence walls, so they'll probably start running up on the fence. I don't prefer that my squash, of any of my squash, to trellis actually. If they hit something naturally on their own, that's fine, but for the most part, I don't really trellis them because they have roots at every joint along the vine of the squash. And if you have the main part of the stem actually die off, then the rest of the plant can actually keep the spaghetti squash going that's set on the vine because of that rooting that happens all along those joints. So I try to let them go ahead and contact the soil if possible, just so they can get those extra nutrients and extra water and things like that all along the vine. We have put out more seeds of basil in between each of our peppers. Those are all up now. They're just really small at this point. They will catch up pretty soon. We actually pulled a few okra off of our plants today and had those just as a fresh eating snack, which is delicious. You can actually just eat okra, just pull it straight off of there and just crunch on it. It's so delicious. Make sure you just get it small. These are all spined varieties, so when they get a little bit bigger, they're a little bit difficult. So you eat those young as possible. I've got watermelon that are starting to set on the vines. I've got a few watermelons that are about hand-sized at this point on the vines. I have Jubilee, Moon and Stars, Dixie Queen, and a couple other varieties of watermelon. Doll babies are one of them, and icebox watermelons are another. And I have those all throughout this one row, as well as some cantaloupes. I've got Hales Jumbo cantaloupes and Charente and a few other varieties of cantaloupes in there. Hoping to get some Kajari melon seeds. I don't have those yet. I want to give those a try, but in general, we just have some really good varieties of watermelon and cantaloupes. Our cucumbers are just looking amazing. I've already pulled, as I mentioned before, a few cucumbers off the vines, and they are absolutely loaded with cucumbers all throughout the vines right now. Some of them could be pulled. They're just a little bit small, so I'm leaving them a little bit longer. Again, this is the Palace King cucumber variety. It's an Asian variety of cucumbers. They get really, really large, 2 feet or more for each fruit. So you want to leave them a little bit longer so they can get that size on them. And you're supposed to be able to pickle them, eat them fresh eating, all kinds of things. They are spined, so I have seen them, but they are burpless. So they got that point working for them, but they're just setting cucumbers all along the vines up on this trellis. This trellis is about 6.5 feet tall, and they are at the top and ready to climb over. And as we mentioned before, we have peppers all over the vines. I pulled some banana peppers yesterday. We ate those with dinner. They were delicious. But as far as bell peppers go, I'm not seeing any bell peppers. We bought some peppers from a couple of big box stores like Menards, and I think that folks had gotten into the containers and switched them around. So I ended up with mostly banana peppers, I think, and Anaheims and jalapenos, and there's another one called a false jalapeno, and then I have some nadapenos and things like that. So we have mostly sweet peppers, but not really a whole lot of bell peppers. I had intended on having purple bell peppers and green bell peppers, but looks like we just ended up with Anaheim and Big Gems. We have some Big Gems back there. Some were from my seed that I started. I started the Big Gems and a few other varieties, and then we bought the bell peppers, or supposed to have been bell peppers, from Menards. So unfortunately, it looks like people got in there and picked over them and switched them around. But that's okay. We'll deal with what we have. And our tomato vines are enormous. We have Amish popcorn that is over 8 feet tall at this point, still has not tasseled. It is just a huge popcorn variety, and I don't know if it just really likes the space or what, but some of our tomatoes are actually as big almost as the popcorn is. So it's reaching almost 8 feet tall at this point. We've had to restake some of these tomatoes because they are just so tall. And again, I have varieties like Missouri Love, which is a local variety of tomatoes, Cherokee Purple, Super Sauce, which I always do, a lot of different varieties of cherry tomatoes like black cherry, and we have pineapple tomatoes. Those are not a cherry tomato, but we're looking forward to trying those. And we have Goliath tomatoes, so we have those up front, and they are actually not quite as tall as some of our other tomatoes. I thought they were going to be these enormous vines, and so far they have not grown as fast as the others, but they do have lots of tomatoes on them. So you can see down in there, I think, that we have some tomatoes hanging on the vines for the Goliath tomatoes. And we have Sweet 100s in here and all kinds of tomato varieties. And usually I make pasta sauce out of my cherry tomatoes because we always end up with so many. And I use my other tomatoes for more of the canning varieties other than the pasta sauce. So we have loads and loads and loads of tomatoes. We have over 100 tomato plants and still expanding. We actually have picked up a few more tomato plants on top of that for my grandson's little raised garden beds. So we have a few more tomatoes, more beans. We've got beans that are now starting to set on the vines. Lots of blooming going on. Lots of squash that we have been harvesting. Our Boston marrows we're setting. Pumpkins on the vines. A lot of our red curries have started setting their little pumpkins on the vines. And our early Sunglow hybrid corn is all tasseled. We're getting ears now. They're starting to pollinate. So you can see those there. We're going in and shaking the corn just to make sure we get a lot of pollination on all of this corn. And some really beautiful little bean blooms. These are probably rattlesnake pole beans because they do bloom that color. And we have Kentucky Wonder, and we have half runners, all kinds of different beans in here. Our eggplants are starting to bloom like crazy and setting eggplants on the vines. We've got cauliflower that has popped up, and it's actually getting a pretty nice head on it. And we have cabbages that are setting on the vines or setting on the plants that are starting to head up. And look at our sweet potatoes, and they are blooming right now, guys, and they are so pretty blooms on them. We've got more cauliflower that's beginning. You can see our cabbages in there. We've got so many butternut squash back there. It is insane how many have shown up. Got more Missouri Love tomatoes, our lettuce and radishes, kale, collards, rutabaga, all just looking wonderful. I was shocked with the heat that they're doing as well as they are. We planted some bunching onions. Those are starting to come up. Our carrots are looking amazing now. We planted more carrots. Those are just starting to come up. And all of our cabbages that were damaged by rabbits and cabbage worms and things like that, those are now starting to head up. So you can see little heads in there that are beginning. And some of our onions are finally starting to head up. I was not thinking we were going to get any onions, but it looks like we actually have a few of them that are going to do pretty well. I've actually considered coming in here and um, pulling most of the ones out that were not doing well or haven't started heading up, making onion powder out of those, or drying them and just making something like chives, and then coming back in and replanting with some more corn, because we still have time to have corn get ready, especially the early Sunglow hybrid like I usually plant. So I've considered that. So that's a possibility. Our potato vines are starting to die back now. We've had a lot of blooming. The blooms have come and gone, and they are just looking so good, drying out and things like that. But soon we'll have some potatoes. Now here is the sometimes a fail, or maybe the embarrassing part, is the extension that we made to the garden of another plot has actually filled up with grass. We tried to keep the grass. I did use the same process as I did to break ground in this garden, but with this big garden has been taking most of my time. I haven't had a whole lot of time to get in here and work on the soil in this one. So we've got a lot of weeds in here we need to get out, a lot of grass. And we do have some squash in here that it's beginning to start making runners. We've got some Tahitian squash and some delicata and things like that that go on out the row. And then we have some potatoes planted in here. But not all of those potatoes came up. They were really withered when I got them. They were from a stock of potatoes that I had in Cheyenne, and they had sat there until my partner could go and get the rest of our stuff. And so they were just sitting there, had been sitting there all spring, and we did not get those planted until June. So they were pretty withered, and they're not doing the best in the world, but we'll probably have a few potatoes, and I'll save those for seed potato. So not everything is a fail. We'll just save those for seed potato for the next season. We may even be able to plant some more potatoes. It just depends on if I can find more seed potatoes, because we don't really have any more seed potatoes left. This was such a much larger space than what I had in Cheyenne that we used all of the seed potatoes that we had, except for the ones that we were still fresh eating. But we had enough potatoes through last year that we went through all of the winter with the potatoes that we had. We grew over 200 pounds, and still had plenty of seed potatoes to plant. So we have all of the seed potatoes planted that we had left. And, well, maybe we'll find some more seed potatoes. Maybe we won't. And we'll try to grow some more again. But these rutabagas over here have just amazed me how big they have gotten with the heat that we've had. We have been in the 90s every day. Some days have been pretty humid, somewhere in the 90 percentile for humidity. And it's just been really, really hot. So the fact that we have radishes and rutabagas that have headed up is just amazing to me. So I'm so thankful for that, so grateful. But they are just doing wonderfully. You can see those radishes just look amazing. And I feel like I just planted those like 2 weeks ago or something, and they are just huge already. And we've got nice heads on those radishes already. And our lettuce is still doing really good, even though it's been so hot. We did plant 2 varieties. Those varieties were the Gourmet Blend as well as the Red Romaine. And the Red Romaine, of course, is just ignores the heat. They actually like heat. So they are doing great. And then, of course, our Gourmet Blend is still doing really well, even though they don't really care for heat that much, because they're more of a blend of different lettuces, some of which is black-seeded Simpson and doesn't do well in heat, but it's doing amazing. It's not been bitter. We could start picking lettuce anytime. And then, of course, when we finish harvesting some things, we'll go back in and plant lettuces and even more radishes and things like that, because it's time to start planting fall crops. We already have cabbage seeds started for our new crop for fall of cabbages. We've actually planted some in ground because we had some spaces where we had some cabbages that just did not make it. So we've got some in ground planting. Those are up, starting to get bigger, but it does take a while for cabbages. But they're all looking wonderful, and I'm actually shocked how well my celery is doing. But it is just doing amazing. You can see that's the Tango celery variety, and it's doing so well all throughout. So I hope everybody is doing well, that you're getting great harvests out of your garden, or if you just started your gardens, because a lot of people in Cheyenne and Alaska and other places have just really gotten a good start on their gardens. I hope they're growing really well. Everything's getting nice and big and lush. But right now is almost the jungle stage in the garden here, because we are getting to the point where I just kind of have to let it go. There's so much that's growing, and it's so close together that it just it gets like a jungle. So like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for notices on new videos as they come out, and make sure you comment below how everything's going in your neck of the woods. We'll see you in the next one.